Good morning. Once again, welcome to episode 4 of AfriCAN Do podcast. Today, it's my pleasure to have with me a good friend and serial. I think he's one of the guys who is worthy of that title, serial entrepreneur, Ken Njoroge, founder of many things. We're just talking earlier about Three Mice, but more recently, Cellulant, which has grown. We'll talk more in greater detail about Cellulant, but Cellulant morphed into many things and now does many things. And now, I think Ken 3 or 4.0 is a new journey of working with entrepreneurs to do many things. So, Ken Njoroge, welcome.
Thanks, Leonard. Good to be chatting again.
Yeah. So Ken, maybe let's go to the beginning and just to give people a rounded feel of who Ken is and where you're coming from. Yeah, while you may have worked a little at the beginning, you're one of the, I would say, earliest tech. Maybe you even now can take the title godfather of Kenyan tech because you've been in the tech space for a very long time. And after a brief stint working a few for the early ISPs, you then went on your own. Maybe just walk us through what that journey was, first with Three Mice and then into Cellulant, and then we can take it from there.
Yes, no, very good journey. Even as you give a sense of that journey. You do like a quick rewind of the of what a long journey it's been.
Yeah.
So it was in the late 90s. I think I probably started working in 96. I was a student then at Strathmore. And they had just introduced the IT program a couple of years before. So I was one of the early pioneers in the IT program in Strathmore. And then I got a job with one of the, subsequently with two ISPs in the early days. One, Interconnect, used to be on Valley Road.
Yeah.
And then I moved to FormNet, and where I was responsible for a team that was building web solutions for the first customers. Once customers got connected, then they needed to figure out beyond email, what else would they use the internet for?
Yeah.
And then around that time, I met the guys who then became my co-founders in the first business was Paul Kukubo and Betty. And we got together, and it was easy to see that the internet was going to be a big thing. So in 98, we started Three Mice. And we were just early folks that build websites for $20,000. These days, you can do those things for $200. Right?
Yes.
And we built a business and a team and quite a reputation around that.
Yes.
So we launched in 98, and we ran that for a while. And then the year 2000, the business was acquired by Africa Online, which was the largest ISP at the time.
Okay, so Africa Online acquired Three Mice.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was a very good journey because it was my first introduction, very rude introduction to transactions, basically the transactions of buying and selling businesses and what matters at the time. And then joining the Africa Online group, which was also started by Ayisi, was quite a visionary entrepreneur. And it was a new division. I was involved during the transaction. We took a liking for each other. It was very nice, and watching this young entrepreneur dreaming about building a business across Africa. And at that time, Africa Online had grown to about 12 countries. They had
12
raised venture
African countries,
capital.
yeah.
So that was very interesting. And then they'd gone to school in the US, Ivy League. So it was very nice to watch that. Hang on, actually, they were super smart, but they were not too different from some of us who had not been out of the country.
Yeah.
We had sort of been born and bred and educated here. And you're like, actually, if they can do it, we can also actually do it.
Okay.
So that was quite an inspiring period.
So Three Mice was bought, but you when Three Mice was bought by Africa Online, you stayed.
Yes,
it was not a buyout and you take your check
and go home.
Yeah. So you stayed as an employee.
Stayed on
of the new.
We were part of the group.
Okay.
The brand remained the same, but actually about 2 years thereafter, we bought it back because Africa Online got acquired by a company called African Lakes, which was a London-listed company. The ownership and the leadership changed quite substantially around that time. And then Aisi and some of the original founding team left shortly thereafter. And then it just didn't feel quite the same. So we eventually spun out. We essentially bought the business back with a plan to pay back the original, the African Lakes folks. And then we went independent again for a while.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. So you, like you rightly say, you had quite an immersion into transactions very early.
Yes.
Because you ran 3 miles for what, 3-4 years, and then you sell, and then you buy back the same 3 miles from.
Yes.
So you began to see this world of buying and selling companies rather early.
Yes, and not with a lot of knowledge at the time. I was a techie, right? So I in those days was so early in my career. I just enjoyed writing code. That's what I liked. And but you paid attention to the transactions and got a sense of what the basic essence was. I think if now knowing what I know now, with a lot of school fees and a lot of sort of bad deals done, over time, I'd probably I'd probably structure it somewhat differently.
Okay.
But as I say, hindsight is 2020. I was still very early, young and early. So I think it just gave me a set of exposure, some kind of exposure so early in my journey that was very valuable as I built Cellulant.
Okay, so now you've taken 3 miles back, but how do we get into Cellulant? So what happens to after you take 3 miles back? You run it, or what happens to 3 miles? So do you reach a stage where you walk away, or how does it evolve? How does the journey evolve from there?
Yeah, that was a very interesting journey. So actually, so somewhere there I shifted my career. So I'd gotten tired of writing software, or rather made a decision that, look, I think writing code was great, but I think I wanted to evolve into something different. So I had shifted my role to working along with the sales guys to just try to understand these things that we build and these things that we do they really actually make a difference to the customers? Because I had this instinct that if you are not creating that much customer value, then the business wouldn't grow. You wouldn't be able to charge top dollar, right? Because you could only go, even in those days, it was very easy to see that doing websites and all those kinds of things was not going to be like a 20,000 per project kind of thing forever. You could see the prices crashing, competition coming, and so on. So we needed to find a new gig. And I figured, look, let me follow the sales guys, go into customer meetings and listen. And we happened to be very fortunate. Some of our early customers were AfriCAN and Kensel at the time. And that was a really interesting eye-opener, because whilst on the internet we were talking about 5,000 people connected to the internet in Kenya, projected to grow to like 20,000 in 5 years or something of that sort.
Yes.
The mobile operators were growing by hundreds of thousands of customers per month.
Yes.
So then I started to really immerse into those businesses. It became very clear somewhere very early that actually most of mass market in Africa will be connected on mobile phones.
Yeah.
So it was very clear to see, wow, that is going to be such a big platform, much bigger platform for us to sort of transform and transfer what we're doing into that kind of platform. So I formed a small group, like a little sort of research group in the team with 3 or 4 really good guys. And we had this thing called Codename Cellulant. So it was like a little R&D project for just studying what was going to happen in the mobile space, because I thought that was essentially sort of 3 Mice's future.
Yeah.
So I did that for about a year. And it was, towards 2003, it was kind of very clear to me at that time that actually mobile was going to be the future. Everything you saw on the internet would come to mobile, including the internet itself would come to mobile in one form or another. We didn't know how.
Yeah.
So it became clear. I became completely convinced, actually, that that's what Cellulant needed, 3 Mice needed to evolve into. But it wasn't particularly a clear enough vision for everybody else to board, right?
Yes.
So at some point, I think we came to a crossroad, in which I felt that, okay, we either transform to mobile or we don't have a future.
Yes.
So because it wasn't a shared view, I think in the end what we did is we basically made a deal in which I spun off Cellulant with a small part of the team, and then traded off my ownership in
3 months.
In 3 months,
Okay.
back to my co-founders.
Okay.
And
another mini transaction there. Another mini transaction there. Yeah.
Yes, and so that was so we spun off Cellulant. And at that time, I'd made friends with Bolaji, who then became my co-founder.
Yes.
Of course, the original, when I met him, the original thing that we're discussing was expanding, 3 mice in West Africa. And so when we spun off Cellulant, I said, hey, if you like that 3 mice vision, I can introduce you to my other co-founders because they're gonna be running that. But if you like the mobile space, then let's do this.
There's another story here. Yeah.
It's something new here. And so, and then this is really about relationships with people. We had already become good friends, so we did a mobile thing together. And then I said, okay, he had a job and he was providing a lot of the initial sort of startup capital by way of his credit card and so on. Those days, cards didn't swipe online. So,
yes.
So you knew different spots, petrol stations, shops, supermarkets, and so on, where you could actually overdraw the damn card.
Yeah.
So we did that. And then at some point, we said, hey, you're Nigerian, I'm Kenyan. Yeah, maybe we should do this thing in both countries. So,
okay.
So I moved to Nigeria for a bit.
Okay.
To start Cellulant there. So in a sense, Cellulant was kind of born by two co-founders, Nigerian, Kenyan, and I started the business in Nigeria. And then since he had a job in Kenya, he stayed in Kenya for a while to kind of mind and move along.
So interestingly, the Kenyan goes to start in Nigeria, and the Nigerian is holding fort in Kenya.
Exactly. And it was a very good journey, right? Yeah. Because I think it worked. It wasn't by design, but it worked because, as Africans, we are very welcoming of visitors.
Yes.
So it was very, like I could meet CEOs. I could just call and schedule a meeting with a CEO in Nigeria than I could in Kenya.
Okay.
Because we'd have a story that, okay, look, as I'm a Kenyan, this is what we are doing, this is what we are building, and so on. I'd like to see the CEO of MTN. And they're like, okay, so you're coming from far. Surely you must
have something.
You must know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it was quite a very interesting dynamic. And I saw this obviously as over the years as Cellulant expanded into many countries. I found it incredibly welcoming. It was very nice actually as a Kenyan doing business in Africa. You always were welcome. People are helpful. It was very interesting.
Because you're now out, you're
outside
you're an FDI.
You're foreign direct investor.
Yeah.
But also, I think actually it was more out of curiosity.
Yes.
I think Kenya, surprisingly, I found it has had a very good brand.
Okay.
As a country for professionals and so on and so forth. And people thought positively about it, and they always thought that it was always an innovator country. So you went to Botswana, you went to Zambia and so on, and you are Kenyan, and you had built a good brand. People looked at you online, the way you branded, the way you communicated, and whatever seemed interesting, you got an audience.
Okay.
And then people loved the idea of Africans building a multinational across Africa. Like, it was a very interesting thing. So
it's novel, it's exciting. Yeah.
So that really worked well for us.
So what is Cellulant selling at this time? Because you've sold Cellulant has sold many.
It has evolved.
At one time, I remember earlier, I think when I first met you, the ringtones were a big thing. Yeah. So you've decided to get into this mobile space.
Yes.
But you got in to do what?
To do mobile content.
Okay.
So we did the news, entertainment news on SMS.
Yes.
And then ringtones and eventually they became music downloads when we started to have data and we started to have phones that could play music. But it was ringtones, those little sort of things.
Oh, really?
Right. And we sold them for about $1 in those days.
Okay.
So you'd call a mobile operator and say, this is what we do. We're a content provider. We are looking to build a really large multinational business across Africa. in Africa for Africa by Africans. That was always the mantra. And people give you an audience. You prepared well. You went presented. They're like, this is new. We haven't done this. Yeah, we surely. Yeah, do you guys have a draft contract? We say yes for sure. And then we got connected. So we built our footprint across a couple of markets. Just doing SMS news and music and ringtones. Actually, between zero, so 2003, 4, 5, maybe 6 were very difficult because the regulatory environment did not have space for us.
Yes.
So we typically went into a country, sold to the mobile operator, and then went out and educated the regulator on this particular space. Eventually, they made space for us. So the first 3-4 years were near-death experiences, right? I mean, hard, right? Like you have almost no revenues. You got this pipeline of projects that are either delayed by a mobile operator or delayed by a regulator, and so on and so forth. It was very tough. And then the young family had just started, and so on. Very important to have a supportive spouse.
Agreed.
Who buys a dream.
Agreed.
Because I think that's a crucial element of the support system you need in the very early days, because you don't have you don't have financing for the business. It generally means also you don't have financing for life, right? You got young kids, all of that. So first few years, mobile content. Eventually, the business peaked. Then by 2008, we were already like $4.5 million business, and it just took off.
Ramping, yeah.
And then in 2008, I think, between 2002, you can imagine, right? So get acquired by AfriCAN in 2000. It's about like you're building, right? The business is still very small. Then you transition. It's a journey of starting again. And then you're fighting with regulators. You're going into countries. You are hunkering down and building. I think we got a first validation in 2008 when we became the top mid-sized business.
Okay.
Like KPMG.
Yes. I remember that. Top 100.
Top 100.
Yes.
And that was a complete surprise.
Yes.
Because, we had generally had our eyes down just building. And then, of course, now it had become clear we had built, but I'd never had we had such an ambition for what we wanted to build. So even at $4.5 million, we didn't think that it was substantial. But going into top 100, they are done data and so on. So you could actually see how you ranked
versus across other people.
Yeah, and also blue chip brands that you typically saw around and so on and so forth. And it was for the first time we're like, oh, interesting. Actually, like we are building something here. The fight and our life doesn't reflect it because you've generally been in the trenches, fighting trench warfare in the early days. But that was quite a special evening.
And you also felt you were also gathering a lot of knowledge because you're in multiple markets.
Absolutely.
You're dealing with regulators in Nigeria. I'm sure there are other African markets.
Yes.
And you're building kind of a Rolodex of these networks, contacts.
Correct.
Who, of course, would continue to serve you into your future. So you now, 2008, you see this validation, yeah? You're now in top 100. You start to look at the business, of course, a bit differently. So where do we go from there? What?
Yeah, I think at 2008, I think what happened, at that size, we started to be able to afford to pay salaries, to pay ourselves. At least, I know that I could predict that, my salary might be a week late, but there'll be a salary.
But it'll come, yeah.
So that really enables a family and enables the household in very many ways, but also in the business, it also enables you're not worrying about salaries anymore. So a lot of that time now you start to think really about the future. Like, what were we trying to build? And we're clear we wanted to build $1 billion business in Africa for Africa by Africans. And was a reason why we wanted to build that big. I think in my mind, I just thought that, look, as young Africans, I grew up in a single parent household. I went to fairly modest primary school, high school. I always saw a lot of dysfunction around me, schools and all of that. It's like nothing really worked. So as an African, you develop a sense of anger, sense of angst about the state of
affairs.
Yeah, and then you're like, surely, like, is it something wrong with us? Like, So I think Cellulant for me was, and that size, building for that size was a way of just proving that surely we must be capable of doing something really well. Yes, the conditions are gonna never be ideal, but those are the cards we've been dealt, right? You say you win a poker game with the cards you've been dealt, right? Not the cards you wish you had.
Yes.
So I said that, yeah, maybe if we could build that big, we could prove to ourselves and also to young people that worked at Cellulant also that actually we don't need to be mediocre. We can aspire, we can dream. It doesn't really matter where you come from. Yes, things will be harder, they'll take longer than normal, but you can actually build, and you can build at the highest level possible. So you start to think about what that business needs to be. So it became clear that when we looked at the future and so on, it became clear the content business was good and could continue to grow.
Yeah.
But I was not sure that we would be able to defend that position, especially our thoughts were, that mobile operators would essentially eventually come into the business.
Yes.
Which eventually happened.
Yes.
So we decided then, maybe we should pivot into financial services. And it's so around 2008, we started to really think hard about financial services, researching, looking at stuff. And by the way, there were little sort of financial services things going on. There was some little mobile money stuff going on in DRC.
Yeah.
There was a company called Cellpay, which was, they were using mobile wallets to pay, I think, government workers or people in the army.
Yeah.
There was a company in South Africa called Visit. Like there were little sort of
it was
spots
starting
of things
to bubble.
Yes, and then we found I think even as far back as 07, there was a M-Pesa, which was a small pilot in Thika. Like you could see all these things. You're like, okay, I think there's something in mobile financial services. It wasn't very clear what. So we decided actually that, maybe actually we should get into that. And we started talking to banks. So by 2009, I think it had become very clear that M-Pesa was
coming. It's coming.
And banks really got scared. And then for about a year and a half, we'd been talking to banks about mobile, where it's going, financial services, and so on. So we seemed to kind of understand some stuff.
Yeah.
So when M-Pesa, it became clear this was going to be a big phenomenon, and it became a threat to banks. The banks then really had a sense of urgency to develop a mobile strategy. So we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And then we got very lucky. A couple of the multinational banks, one in Standard Chartered to be exact, took a leap of faith on some of the stuff we're building, and they went to market fast. And and when with the USSD mobile banking, star 722 hash, which was a thing then. And I think once that happened, then because we had generally been talking to most banks, we had name recognition. So within a very short period of time, we almost became really the de facto provider of those kinds of solutions, transferring to M-Pesa. We pioneered all of those things. And that for the next 10 years or so really defined phase 2 of Cellulant. So which is switching from selling music to mobile operators, and then actually becoming a financial services business, which was really, it was a long journey. And those solutions were exciting enough to really build a name around, right?
Yes.
In music, people used to find it was an interesting fun fact.
Yeah.
In cocktails, they're like, you sell music.
Wow.
They're like, then the people would be surprised at how big the thing was.
Yes.
But banking, I think
you became more mainstream now.
Became a little bit more serious. So that was quite nice for the brand. And then because we had built a footprint, so a lot of these banks then essentially went with us to most of their markets. So we expanded very quickly to like 13 countries, and then we also became the de facto provider for multinational banks. So Standard Chartered, then KCB, then eventually Barclays, ABSA followed, and Standard Bank, Stanbic.
Oh wow!
And
so all the top names. So you pioneered that space and you brought it to life. But now 10 years you've done that financial services. You then decide that what did you see that made you say, okay, I'll need to go and get more money if I'm to continue this journey of building this $1 billion company for Africans by Africans.
Yes. Yeah, we took our first investment in 2011.
Yes.
First investor was an investor called TBL Mira Fund. It's a fantastic lady
Yes.
called Eileen.
Eileen. Yeah.
And we had been talking on and off, I think, for about 5 years or so.
Yes.
So she had built a fund, and she was looking for investing. She was investing in different companies. So, so Cellulant was an interesting investment for them. So, and for me, I was kind of learning, right? So, trying to learn all this sort of space of professional investors. So we talk, and then at some point she'd send me a term sheet. I'd look at this term sheet. I'm like, what are all these
What
things?
are you telling me?
Why would I?
Why would I sign this thing?
Why would I sign this thing? Why would I want to start asking for permission to hire and all of that stuff and so on, which are generally like standard terms in fundraising. So we do that dance. We did that dance for like 5 years. I think when we started to now expand across markets, it became very clear that you could not just bootstrap that business anymore, because you needed to go into a country. Yes, you had 3 customers, but you needed 6 months of runway to get the projects to market, and then to get them to generate revenue to support a team, and so on and so forth. So it was very clear that to grow, we needed capital. So we did. We started raising capital around that time. And actually, since then, we've done a series of rounds. I think the most public one was Series C.
Yes.
In 2018.
The big one.
That big one, yeah. And that was, I think it was very, it was such a tough fundraising round, right? Beyond the headline, people would see the headline. And
you actually took time off from your business to do that thing.
It took about 2 years to close.
Wow.
For some reason, all of my fundraising efforts at Cellulant always happened at difficult times in the market.
Yes.
So I've missed the booms. So every time we've done financing, we've missed the booms that happened, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of there's been a couple of booms, maybe one large one in 2021, 22. But we did 2018. In 2018, it was a $47.5 million round. It was the largest investment in tech ever. Today, if you raise 50, I think you struggle to make top 10.
Yes.
Like the market shortly they opened thereafter, right? And that particular one was led by TPG, was quite a very well-respected financial investor fund out of the US. And they were investing in Europe, emerging markets, and everywhere. So the business has taken about now $122, $123 million of capital. So quite a long journey from the $1.5 million.
Exactly.
Series A, by the way, it was Series A. These days, Series A is $6 million, $8 million. Like the market has really opened up. But what was interesting, I remember when we did that Series C, there was I was working with our offices were in the Dusit complex.
Yes.
And so as I walked, there was this young guy stopped me. He just told me that thing was very inspiring, because it's a raised by somebody that looks and talks like me. Yeah. Right. Which was so that I'd never really, there was a lot of noise, and still there's a lot of noise about the sort of face of Kenyan investors, Kenyan entrepreneurs who actually raise capital.
Yes.
I think Kenya has this interesting phenomenon where you have a lot of expatriate founders and co-founders, and who generally raise capital. I think it's, in my view, fundamentally positive, because the country is hospitable enough to have people start businesses
from
and
anywhere.
Build businesses.
Yeah.
I think what is tragic is then that Kenyan founders would feel disadvantaged being in their own country or being in an African country.
Agreed.
And then the way to remedy that is, capital likes to understand and to be understood. Me and you, if we have gone to Ep.4 schools, there's a way we understand each other.
Yes.
There's a way, there's a thing, even with my own kids, in their final years, they've sort of gone to different education systems. There's a different way that they see things, and so on and so forth. So there's always that divide, right? if I've been to an Ivy League school and I meet an Ivy League investor, there's a level of understanding,
alignment that you have,
and trust that travels faster. So the only way to remedy that is not to complain too much about that expatriate founders get funded. The way to remedy that is actually to raise a lot of African capital.
Yes.
If you do that, it will most probably go to Africans. Yeah.
So 2018, you raised, but I think I can rightly say, having known you, that 2018 was, whether you knew it at the time or not, was the beginning of your last phase as a Cellulant operator.
Yes.
Because I think, how soon after did you step down as CEO of Cellulant?
Yes, I stepped down. I wrote to my board in 2020.
Yes, so 2 years later.
October it was. Yeah. And I wrote that email when I was in Lamu. Because what happened, my dear wife, she had looked at me. I'll give a context. She had looked at me and she just looked at me and she said, "Man, this thing is going to kill you. You've got to leave, and you've got to leave now." Like, she gave me no choice. I really thank her for that foresight, because actually a few days before that, I had not had a wink of sleep.
Wow.
Now when I look back in hindsight, it was actually a series of very difficult years. So we had 2016, it was a collapse of Chase Bank. They were essentially our primary bank. And, by then we were financial services, operational payments business. So your working capital facilities and all of that are really integral to they are the lifeblood of the business. So when the bank collapsed, then those lines dried up, and we had to cut costs deeply. We had to just manage that situation quite tightly. Otherwise, it would have killed us. So that was like a 1-year battle of just trying to stay afloat, right? Like, that particular thing was existential to the company. It doesn't really matter how big we had built. And we had built a company that was supporting customers in 13 markets now. I think by revenue, we were probably $12 million business at the time. So that could just disappear. So it was very stressful. And then after that, then once we got past the crisis, we needed to capitalize, just show up the capital of the business. So I got on the road at a time when the markets were very tough. So 2017, I'm raising capital. It's a whole year, right?
Yeah.
1 year, when you say it, it's very short. But in actual fact, I started off a journey with about 60 investors. So at the end of 1 year, the year, there were 4 that were kind of lukewarm. They were still not committed. So you can imagine there's 56 investors who have said no. So that's a lot of rejection. Right? Like typically you would get a no almost every week. And that is punishing, right? Because you've been building this business for a long time. You know that, yes, there's a lot of stuff that you need to fix. But you know that you built something and you've got a dream, and you can now see,
it's now the runway.
Speculative. Yeah. Like you can actually see financial services is going to be big. We can build $100, $200, $300 million revenue business here. So hearing no from investors who look at many businesses, you doubt yourself a lot. Like, it's very punishing. Like,
that fundraising
traveling schedule, and so on and so forth. Now, typical salespeople, they're used to hearing no's. I've worked with salespeople who typically will go out of 2 meetings, 3 meetings, hear no, and then in the afternoon meeting, they're bringing their A game together. For an entrepreneur, we are creatures of our dreams.
True.
When somebody tells you the thing doesn't make sense, like one investor in a cocktail told me, $12 million business, after how long? I just says, that's not an investable size. That's probably a good business for you and your your wife. It was in a cocktail setting, and then he walked off. So you're kind of left in the room, like in the middle of you're talking to a guy. Yeah. You're left awkwardly in the room, like it was very punishing. So I do that, and then we've got a committed investor, and then they're very thorough with their due diligence. The due diligence takes like a year.
Wow.
And then during the due diligence, like the deal is also, sometimes it goes through moments of wanting to break.
It's shaky, yeah.
Because we've discovered some tax problems in Zimbabwe or Malawi or somewhere.
Yes.
Right? Like all kinds of things. So very stressful. We closed in 2018, and then 2019, the terrorist attack happens.
That does it.
Yes.
Yeah, where you had your offices.
It's not in anyone's script.
Yes.
So there we were generally like, I mean, you just, it's just unimaginable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You just can't.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, if I look back now, it's probably it
was heavy.
It was very heavy, for all of us in the team. But for some reason, it gave me a determination to go. Now, all this time, I've not quite taken leave. Like, I mean, I don't know what I was thinking.
You're just in the grind.
It just seems like there's just one fight after another. So you get over a fight, and then you just energize yourself. You're like, look, man. Like, so 2019, I couldn't take leave. And then 2020, Corona, COVID, the first couple of months.
Yes.
That was mentally tough for everybody. And so by then, you have not quite healed from 2019. And then in 2020, we suffered a massive fraud in Nigeria. And then eventually my co-founder then left under very difficult and unhappy circumstances at the time. I think when my co-founder left, for me, that was a last thing.
You're like, no.
I'm like, this damn thing has taken too much from me now.
Even my boy has gone, man. Now me
like,
alone.
What is this thing? So I took leave immediately after that. So that is how my wife ended up. I ended up in this 1 week where I had not slept a wink. And my wife told me, this thing will
finish you.
It'll kill you dead, as she says. That was that final straw. I wrote to my board. We made a plan. I ended up jumping off the lion in April 21.
And you sent us an email. I remember you sent us
a nice article.
Jumping off the lion email, which was quite cool.
We wrote it together with Kenyan, who's one of our co-founders at Pani.
Now, let's segue into Pani, because me, I like Pani. Pani is a great story.
Yes.
And I don't know if the general market, like I say, and I don't say this lightly when I call you the godfather of Kenyan tech, because you are, man. Even visibly, the things that you've done, I know you speak about them rather not flippantly, but you speak about them as events, but they are really big things in the context of what this market is. And I remember when you sent me the Pani deck to read. There's something, I read the whole deck, very well put together, but I remember one of the statements that you made that really caught my attention as an African entrepreneur is you said that you spent 22 years, building $1 billion African business, and you succeeded, in Cellulant. But when you reflected back on that $1 billion business, 80% of the value that you built in that time span exited the continent, was not domiciled here. And so one of the things that you set out for Pani was that Pani will build African businesses and share this diverse knowledge that you've gotten, whether it's dealing with businesses, regulator, fundraising, and all those things. I think it's a culmination of your experiences, which are very diverse. Some of them very early, transactions you are doing as a relatively young man, and you've been that in transaction space for a while. So maybe now introduce Pani to us and tell us what Pani is and where it's going.
Yes. No, it's very interesting. I think the journey of Cellulant was a very interesting journey. So what are the lessons I brought into Cellulant when I came from 3 Mice, and what lessons do I take from Cellulant as we built Pani the last few years? So 3 Mice taught me that actually you can work hard, get good customers, but the business itself doesn't make money, right?
Yes.
Like it doesn't sustainably make money over a long period of time. So when I came into Cellulant, I was a techie, but I paid a lot of attention to how the business made money, business model, and so on. And so if you do that, then you create value. I think the thing that is still a learning point is how does that value get realized in terms of how does the business eventually get listed or get sold? And at times in the market and so on and so forth, I've seen the value fluctuations from the market. Like a business is kind of the same. But in one setting, investors will value it at this much. In another setting, investors will value it at this much. That has been a very, very interesting and rocky journey to kind of watch in Cellulant, especially now that I'm sort of outside looking in. So how does then most of the value get shipped in? Most of the value gets shipped because of its source of capital, right? As the business grows, if 90% of the capital comes from outside the continent, then most of the return will actually go out of the continent. That's just how it works. And so the way to retain less capital, to retain more of the value on the continent, is to raise the least amount of capital that you need to, without undermining the growth of the business. And then to make sure that little capital, most of it also comes from the continent, right? Like that we ourselves are sort of investing in the business. The first fund, which invested $1.5 million, most of the investors in that particular fund were retired European CEOs. So it's very possible to then say, a bunch of Kenyan CEOs, C-level entrepreneurs can actually put together a fund to write those first $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 checks to the startups. And hopefully, as those people are investing, we are growing the knowledge of investing on the continent. And that can inspire, let's say, the institutional corporate venture capital fund, some of the companies that generate profits to start to put away a little bit of corporate venture capital. And then some of our pension funds actually start to put a little bit of their investments in the venture. So that's what Pani is about. So when we built Pani, we came from the Cellulant experience, just saying, okay, how do we build a model for working with founders and with founding teams in a way that they don't repeat the same mistakes we made, right? So we were very fortunate in our journey, but also we made some stupid mistakes, and some of them were really hurting. They really destroyed value. Some of them we were very lucky that they were not fatal, that you could actually take the hit and move on again. But some of those mistakes, we don't. The next generation of guys, and when I look at the market, there is a bunch of investors, but there's a small class of investors who will build businesses that are bigger than Cellulant, for sure. Actually, in the story of Cellulant, I now have found out the last few years, there's maybe about 50 entrepreneurs who came from Cellulant.
Okay.
I am certain about 2 or 3 of them have businesses that are bigger than Cellulant today.
Oh, wow. They were ex-Cellulant employees.
They were either engineers or people running countries.
Yes.
And now they went and they founded their businesses, some of them 10 years in, and so on. And some of them have larger businesses than Cellulant, which is very interesting. So the next generation will build bigger, better, and faster. So if you can theoretically take away a little bit of the few fatal mistakes by coaching, mentoring in a very structured way, and then make sure that some of the early checks and some of the early investments actually come from us, with our patience, with our knowledge, with our network in the market. A business that has 3 or 4 C-level people or 5 C-level people that are invested just has much more reach in terms of its network in the continent.
Yes.
So that's what Pani does. We wake up every day to spend time with entrepreneurs. We are very passionate about 2 types of entrepreneurs. There's technology entrepreneurs, very much like me, building in the payment space, in fintech, in e-commerce, in e-logistics, e-supply chain. And then we are also very passionate about other entrepreneurs. In the journey of mentoring, we had entrepreneurs. We were just talking about Spares, an entrepreneur in the catering, who you've known very well. You've mentored as well.
Yes.
Esme and Koya and I also have mentored over the years. And we've accumulated a group of those kinds of entrepreneurs that we've just grown to love. And they have the same struggle as the tech entrepreneurs. They have probably less access to capital than the tech entrepreneurs. So we are basically building a platform for mentoring these guys and for funding these entrepreneurs with AfriCAN capital that is very long-term, that's very patient, and that's very flexible in dealing with the volatility of African markets.
I'll tell you what excites me about Pani. And from the beginning, and I am an aspiring investor.
Yes.
As my financial as my financial circumstances change, expect a check from me.
We'll reserve a seat.
Reserve a seat for me. But what excites me about Pani is something that I feel has lacked for the African entrepreneur. I find that the world is rather brutal on the African entrepreneur, that there are some things that we are almost not allowed to do, you know, and you actually speak very candidly and honestly about those things. Yeah. And there's a lot of value in your journey as I listen to it now. It speaks a lot about your mistakes, you know, and how you make them. But I also feel that you're building an environment that shares knowledge, you know, and that knowledge is not the technical knowledge of writing code, but it's that knowledge of the emotional toil, you know, the emotional heartache, the mentoring, you know, the tough conversations. Yet, despite them being tough, they still need to be honest so that you can genuinely build a business that has a lot of value. So that's my admiration of what the journey that Pani is on. But do you feel that as you have gone through this journey of trying to raise AfriCAN capital, do you feel that there's a disconnect between African intellect and knowledge and AfriCAN capital?
Yes, I think so. I think if you... the thing is this, is that the one thing that you see across the continent, it's been true for a long time. I mean, we are world-class in every way. Probably just the way we vote is an issue.
Just that.
If we could solve that,
yes,
you generally find expertise, clarity, good intentions, and so on, strong values everywhere. So in that way, I'm a significant optimist, you know, despite all of the big issues. I think, look, in terms of capital, I think we need to pull our capital together. You know, just in looking at capital, the one thing that is very stark is just we just don't have capital. But also it's because we also don't have generational wealth.
Yes.
That is just a reality. I remember when I raised Series C, I went all the way to San Francisco. And I thought that, okay, surely this is like $50 million. I mean, I was going to meet the CEO of the fund that was investing in Africa at that time. And I thought that, well, these guys are going to grill me the whole afternoon for $50 million. But, you know, the CEO was there for half an hour. Like, you know, who are you guys? Yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you guys are building. And in half an hour, he was like, I like these guys. Let's back them. It's not that guy is smarter than the average guy here. He just has a lot more capital.
True.
And $50 million is 30 minutes worth of
his time. Yeah.
And by the way, before then, the actual money I needed was like $13 million. At some point, they told me, listen, dude, no one's going to get out of bed here for $13 million. You go figure
out how you raise more money
that you can do 50. Then it's worth our time.
Yeah.
So it's not that they are smarter. They just have access to more pools of capital. So we have to start somewhere because these ecosystems have been investing in businesses for a long time. So we just have to start. But you know what? You start with what you have where you are. And so when we started Pani, I said, well, maybe we could put together like a sort of private placement kind of vehicle with 99 investors and pull together $5 million to invest in small companies. It's I've been raising for 2 years. I'd say maybe 30% of my time spent talking to investors. We are halfway there. I think we are in another 1 year we'll close. It's not it took me 1 year to raise 50 in the US. Taken me 3 years to raise 5. Like, we don't complain. We build it. What is most important is actually, if for those investors who've taken that leap of faith, we can continue to build trust and so on, and better still, actually deliver return. Then I think it will just be easier to raise the next round, and we probably raise it much bigger, much faster, and we've got to do that. And probably in that process, just like it happened in Cellulant, when Cellulant raised, if you look at the number of startups in Kenya, I think the number I saw is about 1,000 now.
Yeah.
When we were starting Cellulant, they were not there. When you look at how much capital has gone into the thing, it's foreign capital, but how much capital has gone into the startup, all of that is school fees. It's educating engineers, it's educating entrepreneurs, and so on and so forth. It's educating the market that
lawyers and transaction advisors and the rest.
All of that is very good for the ecosystem. So when you're building the ecosystem, it's a patient game. You need to find a corner that you build. You just make sure we build well. So for us, I think if we can, over the next few years, return $50 million to those investors.
Yes.
That's fantastic. It's going to light the ecosystem on fire. So we just have to focus on doing that. Learn also, because it's a new gig, right?
You're very, you're a very visionary, Ken, in that sense. You kind of, as I listen to your story starting from 3 miles, you've kind of seen along the journey things ahead of the market. And I think this one is a big one. And the reason why I say it's a big one is because when people realize, because they've undervalued asset, I think, even in conversations when we talk about expatriate founders versus local founders, I think we're still on a journey, which you're now leading with Pani and investment, on defining the value of local context.
Yes.
That guy who 30 minutes of his time was $50 million. What's the equivalent of that? And you're very well placed, I think, to walk that journey. Because you're able to see it. And so I as a betting man, I would say this one
you would buy one share.
I'll back that horse.
Yes. We have I think we've got about 40 seats here. We are looking for about we've done 60 investors. We are looking for another 39 to be exact.
Okay.
So it's been generally a nice journey of educating, or building quite a nice community. So that's a nice thing.
No, okay. So how many? Maybe we can talk just briefly about those that you can talk to us about. The businesses that you're currently working with in Pani that are part of your cohort.
Yes.
So to speak, we have mentioned Spares, which is one that we are involved in together. But there are other businesses that you are working with, these diverse entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And how that journey is going, and the value they are finding by having you and Koi by their side.
Yes. Yeah, that's very interesting. So we have essentially 2 mentoring platforms. There is what we call Pani 101. So that's a community of people that are investing in the tech businesses that we're mentoring. And so there we have quite a cohort of businesses we are mentoring, and then we've invested in some of them. And our model is, the way we do is we typically mentor and coach for about 9 months or so before we invest.
Okay.
So we build the relationship, the trust, and all of that as a coach and as a mentor, before solving the problem of capital at the end. Again, just like you said, capital is important, but the local knowledge, that local nuance, the foundation, and so on is so important. So we invest in that first before we actually start to commit investor capital. So we've mentored a bunch of businesses. So the first one we invested in was Market Force, which was quite a rough ride, right?
Yes, yeah.
Then the Market Force founders went through a very tough time. The business model and that particular sector really sort of collapsed. But the entrepreneurs' fighting spirit, they pivoted into a business called Chapter. They basically sort of merged with another set of two brilliant founders, and they became a co-founding team of 4, and went into Chapter and organized themselves around that and carried us
with them
as market force investors into that vehicle. So we invested in that journey. We invested in a business called Letter. They are automating logistics and so on. So those are the 3 businesses we invested. We also had an opportunity to invest in Cellulant, which is kind of a safe investment for our investors.
Okay.
And then we are coaching others. We are coaching a business called Coachella. They are Cellulant tech guys. Another business called Imali. They're doing embedded travel insurance.
Wow.
We are coaching another business called Foresight Tech Group. They are InfoSec company. And then through the Safaricom fund, we are sort of mentoring Chapi.
Which one? Spark Fund.
Yeah, the Spark Fund, the accelerator. So we are a mentor in the Spark Fund. So we are mentoring Chapi, and we're mentoring another business called Nobuk, and then through Endeavor, also mentoring another business called Senga. So we mentor that whole group. At some point, we make investments in some of them. And then the second mentoring platform, which is very interesting, is called Comini. And so this is like a platform for everybody else that they don't need to necessarily be tech. And so that's where there are people like Esme, Spares.
Yes.
And they actually that platform has gone quite quickly.
Yes.
And it's we are developing a model for sort of scaling the mentorship platform so we can actually reach more entrepreneurs. So the last I think 2 or 3 months we've recruited almost I think 23 investors in entrepreneurs into that platform. And I think at some point we'll develop an investment model for them because they are really investable businesses in that particular platform. So that's what keeps us busy.
No, I mean, Ken, for me, what I think here's what excites me, other than just the potential that Pani portends for the market, the fact that we have reached a stage where we're now sharing knowledge. And I think that's been the missing link. You know, when I study the African ecosystem, you know, you would even argue that you'd be told, don't say too much about what you're doing because, but now where we're getting to a landscape where people are able to be open to share their experience, don't go this way because you might struggle with this, that, or the other.
Yes.
And to see you using your knowledge and expertise to now bring some formality to that so that you can grow is a journey that we'll continue to watch.
Yes.
So I'll give you a chance to give us maybe a parting shot and just say anything. It's Pani.Africa. Is that
Pani.Africa?
Pani.Africa. Check it out if you're a young entrepreneur looking for with an interesting business that you think has potential. Check it out, and I think it's a great space and ecosystem. And I bow down to you for taking the lead and sharing your vast knowledge in this space. Don't know if you have anything to say to the viewers who are growing day by day.
No, thanks for this conversation. I think your journey also inspires me a lot, Leonard, because I mean in this journey you just have to keep going, right? Like every season you carry the lessons into the next season and so on. Knowing also that as pioneers, we have to lay the foundation and so on. That's really backbreaking work.
True.
But we just have to do it. We have to share the stories, which is what you're doing on this platform. And also we have to continue to mentor even in the places where we are sitting in advisory boards together.
Exactly. So yeah.
We have to continue to do that work.
Exactly. So that we can build this market into something.
The thing. So I'm appreciative of that journey. And thanks to your listeners for sharing the time.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Join me in thanking Ken Njoroge. Always a vibrant conversation with
Thank
him,
you.
building amazing African businesses. And watch that space for the next 20 to 30 years and see what Pani will give the market. Thank you very much for your time this last 1 hour. And we look forward to having you in episode 5. Asante sana.
Thank you.